Are you looking to take your personal finances to the next level? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Monday Money Tip Podcast, presented by I Was Broke, Now I'm Not, with your host, Joseph Sangle.
Well, welcome to the Money Tip Podcast, presented by Fully Funded Life. My name is Joe Sangle. We're committed to doing just that, help you live your fully funded life. We are wrapping up a series today of Love Month, where we've been using the acronym of LOVE. And I'm with my co-host, as always, Megan Hibbard. You're fired up today?
Fired up.
Tell everybody
Monday.
what episode number we are.
Yes, we are on 243.
243, and we are on the E. So tell everybody what the LOV what it was in the previous episodes, and then tell everybody what the E stands for.
Yep. Okay. So the L was language, O, opportunity, V, vision, or velvety vision.
Yes.
You have to go back
Velveeta
and
vision.
Velveeta
Smooth.
And the E that we're talking about today is estate.
Estate. And so it's Love Month, and the E is for estate planning because we have a lifelong love. And eventually, should the Lord Jesus tarry, and even so, Lord Jesus come quickly, there's a day in which we pass on and go on to glory, and we leave our stuff to those that we leave behind, those that we love the most. And so it's very important that we talk about estate planning. It's a weird topic, I know, but I have a very special guest that is helping us with this. His name is Ben Smith. And if you want to learn more about his stuff, please check out our sponsor, which is us, our Fully Funded Life platform. It has an entire course with him. And so without further ado, here is me introducing Ben Smith on the topic, estate planning. Have a great week, everybody. Well, Ben, thank you so much for sticking around and answering some additional questions. I know that people who have participated in the estate planning experience course probably have some additional questions. You get some frequently asked questions. You can probably predict the first 5 questions you're going to get at the end of an event. We kind of sat down and wrote some of those down. So I thought we would take 4 to 5 minutes to go through each question.
Sure.
And maybe head off some of the questions initially that people have. And so the first question is, it's a question for those that are followers of Christ. They're passionate about giving, generosity, and more than anything, they just want to do things right. Mm-hmm. And we all have this desire to do things right. So here's the question: should I tithe when I die? And if so, how do I do that?
It's a great question. My short answer is yes. I think that there's little downside to tithing when you die. 85% of Christians, when asked why they did not put it in their will, they said no one ever mentioned it. It wasn't like, oh, I don't want to do that. They just never thought about it. So I think if we're blessed with having some assets, if we tithe when we're living, when we get assets, I think it's very natural to say, I want to tithe when it moves. Mm-hmm. Now, some people can tithe between husband and wife. Some spouses go, I don't know about that. I want to make sure I get everything I might need if husband or wife dies, which is
whoever
fine.
Predeceases the other, leave it all to the second one.
Yeah, I think that's a personal decision. If you're financially fine, then 10% arguably is not going to make a significant difference. But if you're uncomfortable between husband and wife, then certainly before it goes to the kids, or even worse if you don't have kids, the cousins and whatever, twice removed, we think that my argument is there are 2 objections. One is, well, I might be broke. Well, then 10% isn't going to be much, right? If I don't have anything.
So I do like the statement that Randy Alcorn made that said giving through your estate is really your last act of stewardship.
Absolutely.
And I really like that because one common thing that I hear is people say, I've already tithed on all my income. Mm-hmm. Well, did you tithe on the increase in value of your home? If you've had a home for 40 or 50 years, that thing has grown substantially. Your 401k, did you tithe on all that? Right? Those type of assets that grow that aren't cash flow. Right. So therefore, we don't really view it as increase, but it is increase. Mm-hmm. So, the question that I would ask, one more question on that is, should people set it as a percentage? Hey, I want to give away 10% of my estate. or should they set it as a dollar amount? What do you feel like is the best approach, or is there a best approach?
I would do percentage because we don't know the dollar amount.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
And it's ever changing.
If you have a really bad 10 years and you don't have a lot, then you might be stressing yourself when you don't need to. So a percentage tends to protect you if it's down, and as well as if it's up, it'll go up. Mm-hmm. The other thing I would encourage people to think about this as not a mandate, like you must do this, and God's going to get you if you don't. I would change it to say it's an opportunity.
Oh, I love it.
To leave a legacy, whether it's as your last act or just an opportunity to invest in the kingdom.
In the thing that's impacted your life so greatly. So
yeah.
I love those words. It's not an obligation, it's an opportunity.
Yeah,
that's
and
great.
My personal story, I don't know if this is the right time, but is I woke up in 1991, $1.5 million in short-term debt and no discretionary income. And it was, in case people were wondering, it was stressful. It wasn't maritally harmonious either, as Martha, my wife, would say. But right about that time, I had a guy that I'd hired come by me and say, maybe you ought to start living according to biblical and what Jesus said rather than what you think. And I got all huffy. I know all that stuff and all this. And I said, well, I don't have any money. I don't have no discretionary income. He said, well, but you have stuff. And he was right. I had an old car. I had office supplies. I had old clothes. I had other stuff. So literally, I started giving what I could. And over a period of 20 years, we not only paid off every dime without bankruptcy, but we were able to give away over $2 million.
That's awesome.
And it's simply looking at not, I got to do it or God's going to get me. It's an opportunity to make a difference. And then I realized that you can't outgive God. And, well, that's like, it's the world's greatest investment. If you invest in the kingdom as he wants you to, there's no way to go wrong on that.
That's awesome.
Too many Christians think of it as I got to do it. And, they tell me it's a law, and they go, do I give 10% after tax or 10% before tax? And I think that's the wrong
That's when
question.
you're viewing obligation.
The question is, how can I make an investment in the kingdom work, to make a difference? And
that's great.
It's like, like your kids, would you say, well, how much do I have to help them? And how much do I have to teach them? And no, it's what can you do? And as an opportunity, and that changes your whole attitude, I think.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. What a great answer. And I really appreciate your sharing your story there. That's awesome. So here's another question, frequently asked question, number 2. How often should a person review or update their will? What is the right frequency?
Ideally, once a year. That's probably, most people are not going to do that, but once every 2 or 3 years anyway. Just because you ought to talk about it between family members that often, because things change. Mm-hmm. Maybe you had your brother down as executor and he's got health issues. Maybe you had your dad down and he's gone. Mm-hmm. They're just different things that happen. Maybe one of the kids is struggling with a drug issue that wasn't when you did it. So every 2 or 3 years, it's worth an hour to talk about it. Doesn't mean you have to go see a lawyer. Yeah. But just to sit down and review it. And if nothing's changed, good.
Good. That's really good. I think a good phrasing of that is, hey, at least once a year review it, not necessarily with the attorney, or when life changes.
Absolutely,
is
when
a
life changes.
Ideal time.
The problem with big change, divorce, death of immediate family member, etc., you might miss some things like you have your son Ralph as executor and he's moved to California. It's just a move, but maybe he doesn't want to fly back to South Carolina from California to handle your estate. There's big issues, but there are also smaller ones that if you have an hour conversation, probably not a bad thing. And then over the course of a couple of years, you may decide it's always a good time to think, well, how are mom and dad doing? Or grandma and granddad, or Aunt Mary. Are we going to have to pay for a nursing home, or who's going to handle this if whatever? And most of us, have extended opportunities. So I think talking about it once every couple of years at least.
Yeah, and I think that's really good. I've heard somebody, I think it's our friend Stan Craig, who said you can onboard that conversation with a loved one by talking about some famous person who died without a will. Sure. Hey, I heard that Prince died without a will. Did you hear that Abe Lincoln, who was an attorney, died without a will? Hey, it got me thinking, do you have a will, Mom and Dad?
Yeah.
And it's a really good way to initiate the conversation, have a really good conversation. So that's awesome. Now, you kind of mentioned this in the previous question, but it really is another common question I get is that somebody regularly, I run into people say, my loved one is headed towards requiring full-time health care. We just can't do it anymore. What do we need to do? That's a loaded question. I get it.
Yeah, it's an important question, and I would say a huge percentage, I don't have exact, don't address this soon enough. They've changed the law and we don't get into what you should do or not do about government support, but and there are two schools of thought. Some people never want any government help. Some people feel I've paid taxes for 50 years. Yeah, I do. But Medicaid will pay for the cost of nursing home if you qualify. But the requirements are now around $2,000 depending on the state of assets and not a whole lot of income. So, but they put in a few years ago a look-back deal so they can go back 5 years. So if mom's going into a nursing home next month, it's a little late to be transferring stuff, but there's still special needs trust, annuities, and other things that can be done. But nursing homes are nice ones, probably in a lot of areas are over $100,000 a year. So it's enough money to think it's worth thinking about it, talking about it. If there's substantial assets involved, an elder law attorney is worth an engagement, even if they're $400, $500 an hour.
Sure. We're talking about spending $100,000 a year. You can certainly go engage.
It's worth an hour of time to get your options nailed down. And once you have them based on the income of whether they're married or not married, spouses can keep more. Houses you can have equity in. It's complex.
Yeah.
So I would go to an elder law attorney and have the discussion. And if mom's health isn't great, but she's not going in next week, or dad, it's still worth having that conversation because the nursing home puts a claim on pretty much whatever you have. Now, the other option is long-term care insurance, which there are pros and cons to that. And if we're getting it late, might be too many cons because of the cost. And it was sold a lot 20 years ago, and then the insurance companies got huge amounts of claims, so they raised the rate substantially. But there are lots of different things that can be done, and the most important thing is, back to your will review, have a meeting and talk about it. And if you decide, you know what, we're going to take our chances, mom and dad may die in the hospital in a week, and that's it. So you never know. Or you may say, you know what, if the average stay for a female is 2.3 years, then we'll set aside a couple hundred, and that's good. So then she can do whatever, she transfer the rest. So there are lots of options, but we just tell people you ought to have the conversation.
Yeah.
And whatever you decide, at least if you make a proactive decision, you can live with it.
Yeah.
But if you don't deal with it, then you're scrambling and going.
Yeah. So now you're dealing with the healthcare issue, which is now emergent,
Right.
and a lack of knowledge, which
Right.
those two combined is a disaster. I love this verse in the Bible in Proverbs 15:22 that says, plans fail. No one wants that to happen. Why? For lack of counsel.
Right.
But with many advisors, they succeed. If I was an attorney, I would have that printed at the front entrance to my office, on my desk, everywhere. Your plans are going to fail without counsel. We are one of your counselors.
You can go, he that's faithful in the least will be given much.
Ooh, very good.
My people perish for lack of knowledge.
Hosea 4:6, I believe that is.
Exactly.
Awesome. So, well, that was a phenomenal conversation with Ben. I'm so grateful that you chose to listen in. If you're watching on YouTube, hey, we'd love for you to drop a comment on what spoke to you the most. For anybody who's listening to this podcast, here's my encouragement to you. Think about what you have in your hands and how you can lever that to do greater good. Yes, through your life, but then beyond your natural life. And think about your heirs. Hey, do you want them fighting over all your stuff? Is that your intent? I suspect it's not. Hey, by making sure you apply these great just tips and wisdom from Ben, I think you'll be able to avoid a lot of heartache in your life and in the lives of those you love the most. And so take a minute to think about what your next decision is. Is it to set up a will? Is it to set up a trust? Is it a charitable living trust, charitable remainder trust, charitable gift annuity? Hey, maybe you need to think about who your executor or trustee is going to be of your estate. You've got those unique possessions, those valuable one-off things. Hey, who's going to get what? Have those conversations. I think you'll be so very glad you did. So, hey, thanks so much for being a part of the podcast. Do one thing this week so that you'll be able to take the steps so that 10 years from now, you'll look back and say, I'm so glad I did that back then. Hey, Ben, thank you so much for being a part of this and helping
Thanks,
us.
Joe.
We
Enjoyed
appreciate it so much.
Appreciate it, buddy.
God bless you.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Monday Money Tip Podcast, presented by I Was Broke, Now I'm Not. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a review and subscribe. And for more great content and to stay up to date, visit iwbnin.com. We'll catch you next time.